Some really difficult news came in through an email the other day where the person I was talking to gave me the invitation to discuss further in a virtual setting. Now, this was a setting that was predetermined. I knew I wouldn't get what I was asking for. I knew I was being released from my duties from a specific project, and I didn't want that. I was quite emotional about it. I knew that the meeting would be difficult for me, and I would have a very hard time listening attentively in this virtual setting. We all have situations like this. I teach this communication content, and quite often I too have to rev up, get to my coaches, go to my friends, practice some of my lingo. I went into that meeting with many notes, but I thought you could also benefit from some tips and reminders. I'll give you 6 of them, but I also want to tell you, I'm not going to tell you to close the door and have the meeting at a time where you have more energy and make notes and try to be focused, because we know all of this. And we definitely, it's not that we don't do it. It's just that that attentive listening in a virtual setting takes even more. So here we go. The first one is to listen past words. Even more in a virtual setting, unlike face to face, we really have to listen for the pauses and the hedges and look at eye contact. My person that I was talking to at this time, he was not making eye contact at much at times. I could tell that he was nervous about what he was telling me, but he had to deliver those news. I'm sure you've had some of those meetings too. I was trying to be empathetic by the situation, for the situation he was in. I was trying to not put myself as a priority, but also feel for this person that had to deliver these news. Mind you, the decision had been made, so this was just moving and moving through the process. So I was trying to listen past just the words. On the flip side, as I was getting some hedging, some pausing, some eye breaking contact, I also noticed later, I've noticed in other meetings that when people speak with conviction, that they really put a full stop at sentences, they slow down their pace, they're making good eye contact, that notes assertiveness. So listen for some of these nonverbals specifically. Speaking of nonverbals, you want to respond in a virtual setting with more nonverbals than you would in a face-to-face setting. In face-to-face, we share air. It's easy for me to lean in. It's easy for me to demonstrate that I'm listening, but only through a small screen, that's really hard to do. I encourage you not just to non-verbally nod and make eye contact, but also to use words or say things like, really, that's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Wow. So verbalize even more than you do in a face-to-face setting. One more tip that I found crazy, wildly interesting was a research study done through the European Journal of Information Systems that measured people's mood state after they were in meetings. If they were watching themselves equally as much as they were watching their audience, they rated their productivity and their self awareness at a lower level. So if you want to have a productive meeting, minimize yourself and pin the other person. So you're really not looking at yourself and your reaction, because it's a catch 22. If you make a facial expression, you'd think, yes, I'm doing this because I'm upset, and you can't physically be in the moment. Tip number 3 is to make friends with silence. And I say this in the United States where I work and live, we tend to fill the space a lot with speaking. Practice counting to 10. And when someone says something to you, you may want to say, I really need to think about this. That's 5 seconds that I did this. Imagine doing it for 10. It doesn't feel comfortable. I was counting with my hands right underneath the camera here, but I want to remind myself to take the moment and pause. Pause, break eye contact if you need to, or grab a pen and start noting down a few things. But you own the space when you do this. I'm not talking from a power move standpoint, but you are embracing the silence and using it as part of your meeting. Another strategy is to repeat words. If you keep talking about sustainability or feasibility or price or whatever it may be, that it comes up again and again, I want to make sure to note that word, because if I repeat it in my answer to you in my conversation, it means that I'm paying attention to specific context and content and listening really well. Another suggestion is to ask questions, and of course, is to ask open-ended questions. There's three questions that I asked in that meeting. First, this was the questions that asked the speaker to elaborate. I wanted more information. So I said, what has changed your strategy moving forward? How has this changed? So I understood a little bit more about the situation. You can ask reflective questions where you ask the person to take a step back and give you again more from the context. In this case, I'd say, what would you say is the main reason for this new strategy? And finally, empathy type of questions. Remember, I said earlier, I could tell he was not comfortable. So I ended my question with, what do you need from me right now? Again, it takes a lot of gumption to do this, but I implore you to do this in order to show and be more specific with listening. Finally, my last call, and this connects to what I just said, is be empathetic. I have a course on the LinkedIn Learning platform that's called Communicating Across Cultures Virtually. And when you are connecting and making relationships and doing work with people from all over the world, if there's one thing you need to do first is to be empathetic about their situation, not just the fact that it's 6 a.m. in Australia when you're talking to them, about maybe the fact that they're communicating in a language that's not native to them. I have a short clip that I shared in the newsletter that we're going to put in the comments here. But this is critical. In most cases, people are uncomfortable, they're not trained as well, they're not as prepared, and using empathy is a really good way to be a good listener. So I implore you to use these 6 strategies in order to use and be more empathetic and be more attentive and look to nonverbals and go past words, use silence and ask open-ended questions as you listen attentively in a virtual setting. Thanks for focusing on this and being on my YouTube channel. And if you have a question for this, please note it and I'll respond. Take care.